Okay, so in this video, we will establish this identity. And this one's more complicated than the other ones we've had to deal with. Um, and as before, we have two basic options. We can take the whole equation, manipulate it. Like with this one, since I have some fraction equals some other fraction, it might work well to do that because then we can cross multiply. That's potentially going to be really effective. Depends. Or we can pick one side or the other to start with, and we can either start with the left-hand side or the right-hand side. And which one we do, that's up to us. Now, I think I see what's going to be the easiest. So, what I want to do with this one is I want to try an option that I don't think will be easiest, and just see how it goes. And then maybe it works, and if it does, awesome. Maybe I'll make another video using the easier one, or I might make it part of this video. I guess depending on the length of the overall video. Just don't not to have like a 20-minute video. So we'll see how long this one is. So let's start with cross multiplying. I'm going to take and I'm just gonna, well, I guess first I'll just copy the problem because I want to have the original undisturbed to look at. So secant theta minus cosine theta all over secant theta plus cosine theta. That equals sine squared theta over 1 plus cosine squared theta. And we have some options as to how we want to indicate. Try to make that fraction better. Good. So as to how I want to indicate what I'm doing, I mean, I can just say, I'm going to cross multiply. Well, what does that mean? Well, I'm going to do it in steps so it's totally clear, but I'll point out the shortcut that you can use. So I'm going to multiply both sides by 1 plus cosine squared theta. And on the right, that's going to allow me to do some cancellation. Kind of running out of room there. 1 plus cosine theta. Okay, so on the right, that's going to allow me to just cancel those out, which is the reason I'm doing this. So then I'll have 1 plus, more about running out of room again. So let's do this. 1 plus, yeah, that'll work. That'll work. Okay, 1 plus cosine squared theta times secant theta minus cosine theta equals sine squared theta. Okay. On the left side, sorry. Left side, this is all over secant theta plus cosine theta. Okay. Rearrange this a little bit. Let's try to save some effort. Oh well. Okay, so there we go. All right. I've multiplied both sides by 1 plus cosine squared theta and canceled as appropriate. So now I'm going to multiply both sides by secant theta plus cosine theta. Hopefully I have a little cramped, but it worked. It's a little too cramped as well. Also, the other thing, when you're manipulating the entire equation, you're going to have a shortage of horizontal space. This is really crammed in there, but hopefully that's clear enough. Yeah, so multiply both sides by secant theta plus cosine theta. So on the left, this is going to allow me to do some cancellation. So what I get from this is that I end up with no fraction at all. So I've got 1 plus cosine squared theta times secant theta minus cosine theta equals sine, not secant. Oops. Sorry, struggling with the interface here. Sine squared theta times, not plus, times secant theta plus cosine theta. Okay? So, no fraction anymore. That's the benefit. That's why I did this. Now, really, if I say, I'm going to cross multiply as a shortcut, I really did not have to write all of this. If I'm confident what I'm doing, I can say, well, I'm just going to basically take this guy and plonk it over here next to the sine, and take this guy and plonk it over here next to the secant minus cosine, which is essentially what I ended up with, right? So if I want, I can skip writing all of this stuff. I can save myself some time and effort. If I'm confident that I'm doing it right, that's fine. If I'm not so confident, maybe I do need to write all these steps out. Okay, so what do we do now? Well, oops. There. So I need to distribute. So essentially, I'm going to FOIL on the left-hand side, right? And on the right-hand side, I'm just distributing the sine squared onto those two terms. Okay, so when I FOIL, I'm going to have 1 times secant, so that is secant theta, right? And then 1 times negative cosine theta, so minus cosine theta. And then cosine squared times secant. And I am going to run short on room, so I'll point out, since secant is the reciprocal of cosine, this is like cosine squared of theta times 1 over cosine theta. Right, so I'll write it like this, since I'm short on space and I don't want to run out. Again, this is because secant is the reciprocal of cosine. Okay, and then minus cosine cubed, and that's, I'm a little worried now. That cube is not the best, and I'm not sure if I'm going to get stuck and not have a way forward. Anyway, so sine squared theta, and again, since I'm running short on space, I'm going to put horizontal space. I'm going to do that. Sine squared over cosine. Sine squared theta over cosine theta. And then continue distributing sine squared theta cosine theta. Now, here, I can do some reduction. This is just cosine, right? So this is secant theta minus cosine theta plus cosine theta, which is encouraging. I'll be able to do some cancellation. Minus cosine cubed theta equals sine squared theta over cosine theta plus sine squared theta times cosine theta. I'm having to rewrite the entire thing, but I am just doing one step at a time. Fix that theta. That's a pretty bad theta. Okay. So yeah, I get to do some cancellation, which that's very nice. Glad I could do that. So now I have secant theta minus cosine cubed theta equals sine squared theta over cosine theta, which, remember, this is, here, let's go ahead and do this. Let's just go ahead and write this as 1 over cosine, because that will make things a little more recognizable, I think. Okay, so plus sine squared theta cosine theta. Now this is a lot of writing, but this is better, I think. You might see what I need to do next. I think what I need to do is multiply both sides by cosine, which I'm just trying to get rid of the fractions, basically. So multiply cosine theta on both sides. Okay. So on the left, I'm going to have 1 minus cosine to the 4th power of theta. And again, this is making me a little nervous. That exponent's going to be a problem, but we will do our best. And that equals, when I distribute this cosine and it applies here, it doesn't apply to the bottom, of course. I'll have sine squared theta over cosine theta times cosine theta. So those cosines will cancel. And then here, I'll have cosine squared. And this is starting to work out. I like where this is going. Sine squared theta plus sine squared. It's not a very good sign. Let's fix that. Sine squared theta cosine squared theta. This might not look good, but this is actually fine. We're doing okay. This 4 doesn't worry me as much as anymore. So I think the way forward is the following. On the right, I need to factor that maybe that sine squared never from here, maybe I never should have distributed that. Because I seem to be factoring, again, that same sine squared back to the way that it was. And from this, you might be able to tell, maybe, what I originally thought was the easiest approach, which we'll probably end up doing in a separate video, because we're over 10 minutes now. Okay, so plus cosine squared theta, all right? Well, I notice on the left, this is harder to see, so I'm reluctant to do this the clever way. Let's do it the more straightforward way. As we've done in other videos, sine squared can be replaced with 1 minus cosine squared theta because of the Pythagorean identity. So I have 1 minus cosine to the fourth of theta equals 1 minus cosine squared of theta times 1 plus cosine squared of theta. Okay. So, on the right, I can now FOIL this. I'll have 1 times 1. I'll have 1 times cosine squared. I will have negative cosine squared times 1. And I will have negative cosine squared times cosine to the fourth. So this is going to be a bit much, but you'll see it's going to work out. So 1 times 1 is 1. 1 times cosine squared is cosine squared. Negative cosine squared times 1 will just be negative cosine squared. And then minus cosine squared times cosine squared is cosine to the fourth power of theta. And you might notice, hey, we get to cancel. And I get 1 minus cosine to the fourth of theta is equal to 1 minus cosine to the fourth of theta. So, sure enough, that worked out just fine. We got the result. Now, this is a lot of steps. So what I'm going to do is I'll cut the video here, and we will go look at maybe an easier way to do this one.